All right, good morning. Thank you very much for being here. I'd especially like to welcome so many of our House Republican colleagues who have joined us. I know that we're competing with several other committee meetings and hearings at this time, but the truth is this is a real signal that these ideas and topics matter. And it is important to understand the impacts here. And I want to thank Representatives Nelson, Flick, and Grove for their leadership on this issue. One person, one vote, one time. I think it's fairly simple. Does not sound like it should be complicated. But the problem of double voting has recently made the news here in Pennsylvania. Just last week, a Pennsylvania man, a registered Democrat, pled guilty to not only voting in multiple Pennsylvania counties in the same election over a number of years, but also voting in both Pennsylvania and Florida. And while the punishment this person faced for this unique form of election fraud was steep, I believe that it should be. Our state's election code is designed to make voting easy and accessible for Pennsylvanians. And as the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said recently, the purpose of and the objective of the election code is to obtain freedom of choice, a fair election, and an honest election return. And while we still believe, and the recent news of double voting proves, more needs to be done to make it easy to vote and hard to cheat in Pennsylvania to fully achieve that objective. We also agree with the Commonwealth Court, which in the Genser decision earlier this year stated that the objective of the election code is advanced by ensuring that each qualified elector has the opportunity to vote exactly once in each primary or election, not twice, which would prevent the honest election return. As a practical matter, we're just a month away or so from the 2024 general election. While election cases are currently being litigated, the truth is, I think, as a practical matter, what steps can be done to take to ensure that double voting like this does not occur again. Given the recent news, it is clear that Pennsylvania fell short, and we need to be better informed about double voting as the public, its legal consequences, and what to do to ensure that voters are only casting one ballot in each election. Since this issue involves a clear threat to election security, and the fact that earlier just this year, Governor Shapiro formed an elections threats task force, which includes the Secretary of the Commonwealth, we call on the Governor and Secretary Schmidt to engage in a public awareness campaign on this very issue. The last day to register to vote is about 20 days away. Now is the time for Pennsylvanians to rectify any voting discrepancies, remove all doubt that their voting location, and ensure that they exercise their franchise freely and legally. I'll say it again, one person, one vote, one time. It really can be that simple. I want to thank the members for their commitment to ensuring Pennsylvania has free, fair, and legal and honest elections. The House Republican Caucus has been and remains a leader in promoting free, fair, and legal elections, and we hope that the Governor, the Secretary, and all Pennsylvanians will join us in this goal because of how important it is. One person, one vote, one time. With that, I'll turn it over to Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Leader Cutler. I appreciate your commitment to election integrity, even on complex issues such as double voting across state lines. We believe it should be easy to vote, hard to cheat. And when we say easy to vote, that does mean one person, one vote, one time. To be clear, double voting is not a partisan issue. Our analysis identified potential double voters across the political spectrum. That means Republicans, Democrats, and independents. This isn't about one party over another, it's about election integrity. Our initial findings suggest that several hundred potential double voters, if examined between all of our neighboring states, would exist. One double vote is one too many. These numbers may not impact our national election, but they can have significant impact on our local elections, which have much tighter margins. Yesterday, Representative Flick and I submitted a formal letter to Attorney General Henry and Secretary of State Al Schmidt regarding our concerns of multiple incidents of potential double voters between Pennsylvania and Ohio. They were identified as a result of detailed analysis of publicly accessible voter rolls and then change of address databases compared between our states. Leader Cutler shared the reality of last week's admission of guilt of a double voter across multiple states and counties. I want to share the limitations of ERIC, the Electronic Registration Information Center, created to address interstate voting and voter roll list maintenance. Some large states, like California and New York, have not participated in ERIC. And recently, additional states have left, like Florida and Ohio. So right now, Ohio, West Virginia, Virginia, and New York are all not sharing their voter information. And we want to know what steps the Shapiro administration is taking to proactively address this issue. The bottom line is, over half the nation's population is not participating in ERIC. 25 states are in, 25 states are out. Pennsylvania is also limited. We participate and give information to ERIC, but Title 25 restricts how that information is used within the state. We must do better. We can do better to proactively address election integrity and the issue of double voting. We're calling on Secretary Schmidt to stop issuing additional changes or directives in election guidance this close to November and instead start a proactive Don't Double Vote campaign. It is time that every lawful citizen votes, and they vote just once. Next session, we'll work on an MOA, a Memorandum of Agreement, with our neighboring states, which will actively share and investigate incidents of this state across state lines. States like Florida, Alabama, Mississippi have already implemented MOA agreements, and we can too. We are 35 days out before a major election. Counties have worked hard to create safe, transparent, and reliable processes to ensure each voter gets a single voice. From my days in the Marine Corps, we said, start strong and finish strong. We should be working together to achieve excellence in our elections. Preventing double voting is part of that commitment. In February of this year, Governor Shapiro launched an election integrity task force. Where are their reports, their notes, their transcripts, or other productive efforts to ensure this taxpayer effort is going to bring in a fair election? Representative Flick will share more details of our 13-county comparison with voters in Ohio and how each county we sampled identified potential cases of double voters. This was a considerable undertaking. We didn't have resources, didn't have a budget, and we didn't look at Maryland, New York, New Jersey. That work may continue. For today, Representative Flick will address his findings with Ohio.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here. I'd like to extend my gratitude for Representative Nelson for all the support and all the help he's given to this. A little bit about my background till we get into the data analytics. I think everybody here, in fact, all throughout the House of Representatives, bring great value with their background, and whether that background, in my case, is IT or farming or legal background. So it's great when you can use your previous knowledge to work on projects, again, with Rep. Nelson. So prior to coming here, I spent almost 4 decades working with 61 of the 67 counties developing software in the Commonwealth. And with that, I worked with DDAP, I worked with OMSOS, I worked with ODP, and a host of others, uploading and downloading and analyzing data. So when Rep. Nelson came to me, it was sort of a pretty good fit for me to work with the Department of State to grab what is publicly available that I can get and that you can get and interpret and compare that to the download I did from the Department of State from Ohio and all 88 counties there. So that being said, as you can imagine, there's a vast data set of millions of records, but not surprisingly, as we confirmed today, we have uncovered evidence of double voting. Just last week, as already been mentioned, the Montgomery County resident or voter is now facing 15 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. So this is serious. These are felonies, and one, as has been mentioned, is too many. We've uncovered many, many more than just one. So to be clear, we still have much, much work to do. As Representative Nelson has said, we've only worked with 12 or 13 counties in Pennsylvania that we've downloaded. One of the issues is for Pennsylvania in this download data set, 67 counties have 67 different formats. We have to work with that. In my district, the 83rd district, that includes Lycoming County and Union County. For me, simply to get those two counties and merge that data, it's quite a process. Fortunately for Ohio, I was able to download all 88 counties, and guess what? One format. So the Ohio part is much easier. So as we work with Maryland and New Jersey and Delaware and all the other surrounding states, I would love to see us grow to a point where there's a national database like other countries have in one format. It would make this process so much easier. So at the risk of getting too technical, when we download these 67 different formats, as you know, there's no voter ID number. So I can't just look at Ohio data and look at Pennsylvania data and say, oh, here we have Eric Nelson. There might be two Eric Nelsons, same first name, same last name. We also get a birth date from Ohio, and we get a birth date from Pennsylvania. So sadly, the common denominator is pretty complex, that you have to string together a first name, middle name, last name, and a birth date. So what does that mean? There certainly could be two John Smiths, right, with the same birth date in Ohio and in Pennsylvania. But as Rep. Nelson and I looked at this data and then further investigated with the USPS and other databases that show address changes, there's certainly not two Cornelius McGillicuddies and his wife Gladys that lived in Franklin County and happened to both vote the same day and then move into Hamilton County in Ohio and also vote. So we have work to do, as I said. So where do we go from here? We continue to work with all stakeholders from both sides of the aisle and throughout all 50 states to ensure that we have fair elections. Our constituents want it, and our constituents deserve it. Thank you, and I'll be available for questions afterwards.
Good morning. I'm Representative Brad Roy, and I am the Republican chair of the State Government Committee. This is a very important topic. A lot of people have concerns with the upcoming election, and I think everybody, Republicans and Democrats, should all agree we want a fair election where all election laws are followed. A lot of folks are already getting nervous. Secretary Schmidt had stated that he wouldn't issue any more guidance to counties, directives, within 45 days. That was violated the other day. Counties are just struggling to, they just want to know what the rules are going to be, and they keep changing as we get closer to the election. Previously, I had asked Secretary Schmidt actually numerous times to restore the part of the website, the election return website, that shows how many precincts have reported election results, how many have not reported, and what % of the vote has been reported. They took that off the website. Well, the public gets very nervous when there's last-minute changes to the election, not last minute, but not knowing, is there one precinct left to count? Are there two? Now, with this issue of double voting, the state should be advertising that a lot, that it's a felony. If some college student votes back home and they vote from their dorm room, they're going to be convicted of a felony. They're not going to be able to be a nurse or a teacher or an EMT or anything they might want to do, and they're disenfranchising other voters. They're destroying our democracy. It's supposed to be one person, one vote, not this person gets 2 votes, everybody else only gets 1 vote. The state is doing a lot. You see around the Capitol, there are these huge posters reminding people they're like 3 feet by 2 feet, reminding people to vote. When you go to the liquor store, on the bag that you get, on your receipt, it reminds you to vote. The Department of State is sending letters to prison inmates. Even though convicted felons cannot legally vote, convicted felons in state prisons are receiving letters reminding them to register to vote and request mail-in ballots. That's another issue to look at. But the state should be advertising, promoting that it's a felony to vote twice, and you're going to go to jail, you're going to have big fines, and that conviction is going to carry with you the rest of your life. If they can advertise all these other things related to the election, they should be advertising it's a felony to vote twice. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Rowe, Leader Cutler, Representative Nelson, Representative Flick. Excellent work. Seriously, excellent work. That's legislative oversight. That is citizens stepping up, looking at an issue, and finding a very common sense solution. No bill, right? No resolution, just a simple, we identified an issue, and the administration could take executive action today to fix the issue. After the 2020 election, I held over a dozen hearings on election-related issues with testimony from Republicans, Democrats, county officials, interest groups, policy experts, and citizens. These efforts resulted in House Bill 1300, a comprehensive election bill which updated our election code. I want to emphasize, that bill was a bipartisan endeavor. Its passage with support from both sides of the aisle is a clear indication of its fairness and credibility in addressing our election-related issues. This bill was designed to pass and ensure our elections are conducted above reproach, including eliminating double voting. Governor Wolf vetoed this bill because, frankly, he didn't read it. Just days after vetoing the bill, according to his veto message, because of voter ID, days later, in the Philadelphia Inquirer, he came out and supported the ID provision in House Bill 1300, of which he vetoed. Years later, we're still dealing with the scores of issues House Bill 1300 would have fixed. House Democrats have refused to address real election reform this session, which hasn't just left us with unresolved issues, but created more of them. It is disheartening to note that we still lack uniform policies statewide. This inconsistency should underscore the urgent need for reform. From illegal ballot curing to drop boxes and counting undated ballots, there is a patchwork of conflicting policies, especially affecting districts which include multiple counties. We also have another outstanding issue that it's not too late to fix, one I am still waiting for over 60 days, 60 of my colleagues hear back from the governor. How will his administration deal with the Supreme Court ruling that voter registration changes made through vehicle registrations are legally questionable? When will this practice stop? And will he ensure that all voters who updated their voter registration are contacted to confirm they wanted to do this in the first place? Oh, and by the way, Shapiro's spokesman said of this issue, quote, automatic voter registration is completely separate from the process by which customer changes a voter registration address. So all this bravado about automatic voter registration is just a lie? Maybe someone should ask because the governor isn't answering our questions. Maybe he will answer yours. The most frustrating part of dealing with this issue for me personally is a willingness to engage with the other side of the aisle. House Republicans have shown time and time again we take the concerns and ideas of Democrats seriously. Look no further than House Bill 1300 of last session if you don't believe me. Rather than working with us, Democrats are intent on using their political influence to ignore the election laws and engage in lawfare. Shapiro put together an election integrity task force. That remains silent as liberal dark money groups seek to dismantle election integrity provisions in our laws every day in court. The trend is clear. Democrats don't want fair elections. They want to win at any cost. This is why it's so important for all Pennsylvanians to report suspicious activity. If you see something, say something, as the saying goes. But most importantly, we need everyone to vote so we can actually reform the system. We can do our part as legislators only if elected, which requires folks to do precisely what the Department of State has plastered all over our Capitol, sending out in flyers and official mail from PennDOT. PennDOT, please go vote. So you know what? If PennDOT, Department of Human Services, Department of State can plaster this Commonwealth and get out the vote cards, they can stop double voting, and they can ensure that people are not illegally voting at drop boxes. That is the issue in Pennsylvania since 2020. It is illegal voting. These double votes, if they're actually registered and living in Pennsylvania, that is a legal vote. Their illegal vote is when they vote in another state. Same thing with drop boxes. As the former First Lady of Pennsylvania found out, you cannot hand in more than one ballot. That is an illegal vote. And we all know too well that there are close elections in this Commonwealth where a single vote can determine the outcome of an election. And if that vote is actually illegal, you have a questionable individual who is representing their constituency. And the unfortunate part is we're talking after the fact, right? These individuals have voted, which means their vote has counted. Their vote has counted. That is the issue at hand, illegal voting. and stopping it before it happens. So I urge the administration to put forward an executive action today to ensure we do not have illegal voting in this coming election. You could have done this, get out the vote, and vote legally, and allowed citizens to know you can't double vote, and you shouldn't be handing in more than one ballot at unsecured drop boxes all across this Commonwealth. I commend the gentlemen on their hard work, their due diligence, and doing things the right way to ensure that we can have faith and trust in our elections. With that, I will turn it back over to Representative Nelson.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our colleagues. And we'll take a few short questions if we have them. All right, that's fantastic. Take care.